Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nandi. Today's video is a really important one because we are going to be talking about how to be more emotionally healthy. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Before we start talking about being emotionally healthy, we need to understand what emotional maturity is. When you have emotional maturity, that basically means that you can handle your emotions regardless of the circumstances that you are in. There are a few ways to strengthen your emotional maturity to become more emotionally healthy. The first one is to take responsibility. And I say this all the time, but you have to be responsible for your own actions. Instead of blaming others, you take accountability for what you did, and you also take steps to changing your behavior. It's one thing to be responsible for how you behaved in a certain situation, but you also have to be very action oriented, because if you are just going to take accountability but not take steps into correcting the behavior, then it is kind of that's a little backwards. Instead of blaming others, you more so want to look at what steps can I do, or what steps can I take to improve the situation. Going along with taking responsibility, another way to develop more emotional maturity is to own your mistakes. Don't place the blame on anyone else. I think this gets a little tricky depending on the way that people react to you from a certain situation. So I think it's easier to kind of put some of the blame off on the other person's reactions. But when you want to grow to be more emotionally mature, you want to make sure that you are taking responsibility for your actions, you're owning your mistakes, and that means that there are no excuses. So regardless of how someone acted in the situation, that does not mean that you still have the right to act the way that you act. So own your mistakes and don't make excuses. And also admit that you were wrong. For some reason, that is just really hard for people to admit that they are wrong, but that is a part of being emotional mature. Another way to become more emotionally mature is to practice vulnerability. Of course, that comes with a lot of hardships on its own, but being able to ask for help, being able to open up to others will strengthen relationships that you have with people, and it will also teach you how to come to terms with your emotions or be more familiar with the emotions that you may be feeling. Going along with vulnerability, accepting and recognizing your needs. So whether that be admitting to yourself that you are burnt out or you need help, those two kind of go hand in hand. Recognizing and admitting that you need something is definitely a big part of being vulnerable. Practicing self-forgiveness is a huge way to become more emotionally mature, to just let go of things of the past and not letting that constantly affect your behavior in the future. Detaching your emotions from your reaction, that is huge. I think emotion absolutely clouds our judgment, and it makes us very responsive. So instead of feeling something and immediately acting in that moment, being able to detach yourself from your emotions is taking a step back, really thinking the situation through before you respond to it. And that's why a lot of people say that you should walk away from arguments or things that could be like a potential big blow up before you do a response. And obviously, that's not something that you'll be able to do all the time. That's not really realistic when you're right in that moment. But even pausing to take a deep breath before you react can also just give you that quick second to think. And going along with that, just taking a calm approach and recognizing your fear and anxiety. A lot of the time, the way that we react emotionally is because of, the actions or the words of another person, which triggers something in us, which provokes a response. So that is why it is important to really understand not only how you feel, but also what triggered that response. Okay, so does age matter with emotional maturity? So I would say yes and no. So yes, because really critical parts of your brain don't really develop fully until you are 25. So because of that, I think it is easier to be a little more impulsive, maybe a little more reactionary. But also that does not mean that just because you're over 25 that you are not quick to anger or quick to response, because that's also not true. But I think emotional maturity doesn't really have an age. The last thing I want to touch on is just how do you learn how to be more emotionally mature. So like I mentioned before, in order to become emotionally mature, it is critical to understand your emotions and understand why you react the way that you do. There are a wide variety of emotions. Some of the emotions that come off the bat are like fear, anger, sadness, happy. You know, those are the more general emotions, but there are a lot of emotions. That's why it's very important to be able to think about what it is exactly that you are feeling in that moment. Become more self-aware, let go of shame. And the last one is to be open to learning. But I kind of think that those two things go hand in hand, because unless you let go of not only just letting go of shame, but also letting go of expectations that you might place on yourself. Huge in forgiving yourself and learning to let go of shame and being open to learning. Because if you have that shame blocking you, or you have that shame stopping you from evolving, that is not going to be productive if you are wanting to learn. So a couple things to remember if you are trying to become more emotionally mature: ignoring your trauma or your issues will not make it go away. You also cannot ignore your feelings, because if you do, that will just result in negative coping skills. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.